we're excited to celebrate Greg's new collection, listening to Miles Davis and Gil Evans on a January night. We're really excited to hear from you, Greg, and I was wondering if you could start just by telling us a little bit about what inspired this collection and then sharing some selections with us.
Sure, Megan. Before I do that, I'd like to say thank you, first of all, to you for hosting this. And secondly, to Candace, who's done she's been phenomenal in terms of supporting me in my efforts to become a poet. And I would also add that the last three books that have been published have been through Silverbow, and the cover artwork has all been Candace's, and I find it quite remarkable. It's quite abstract, but somehow it captures some of the essence of what I'm trying to capture with the words. Again, thanks to Candace and you. Most of all, I'd like to say thank you to everybody who's shown up tonight because I know it's kind of a pain in the butt to come in, and I know it's kind of difficult, and there's all different time zones that are involved and everything. So I appreciate those of you who have made an effort to show up, and I hope we cover some things tonight that somehow resonate with you in a way that is meaningful. And I know that not every poem is going to resonate, and that's okay. But if I have a few that do, then that's my goal. I guess I'll just go ahead and start. And the first poem I'd like to read is called Love of a Dog. And obviously, this is in reference to one of the members of the ever evolving pack of rescue dogs. The nose scarcely felt by my fingers hanging over the side of my bed, unrecognized, unnoticed in my sleep until his wet nose nudges more assertively and his punk hairdo pushes against my hand. Before my alarm sounds, I am aware morning has arrived, and the rescue dog with PTSD wants connection, reassurance that, what, I am still alive, that I still love him, that I'll still pet his curly facial fur at 6 a.m. I moan and turn, yes, I will. The second poem, actually, this merits a little bit of introduction. One of our recent rescue dogs was an abandoned dog found on the streets of a small town in the northeast Colorado corner of Fort Collins, and we were looking for a companion for a grieving dog that had just lost her best buddy, and she was seriously grieving. So this was kind of important to us, and we learned about this dog that was in the Humane Society there, and a person named Holly orchestrated our meeting this dog. And I initially thought that Holly was the head honcho of the Humane Society, but as I have since learned, she's just a very, very active volunteer. So this is about Holly and Dexter. Driving across the flat, high plains of western Nebraska, northeastern Colorado, dry dirt and cornfields, following signs to Fort Morgan, where Dexter, our dog, lived for half a year in the Humane Society shelter, waiting for his forever family. He was a special dog, the favorite of all the staff, who made him the greeter, keeping him in front at the foot of the reception desk. They were sad and happy when we adopted him, and they waved, wishing him and us well as we drove off. 6 years later, we retraced the route, stopping at the shelter for the staff to see their greeter. Now old and infirm, but still the gentlest dog we've ever known. He and they deserve this reunion. Holly saw him struggle in, and together they collapsed on the floor. She stroked him and spoke softly, leaning over to enwrap his neck. She buried her face in his fur, and her shoulders began to bob, and we heard her deep breaths. So that one's for Holly and Dexter. This one is called Smokey. He slipped to his side on the hardwood floor, exhausted after an afternoon of seizures, and I curled behind him like a lover spooning, though he didn't notice. I spooned the giant shepherd until we both fell asleep, awakening surprised in the morning, both still breathing. It was not quite his time just yet. My arm draped over his fur, his calm body softly breathing. I wanted him not to go, though if he must, I thought, perhaps I should too. A thought quickly squelched for an excess of melodrama. Heavy snow. With the pinky side of her balled up fist, she wiped circles in the frosted kitchen window and opened a portal to the snow falling outside. They were large flakes, wet and heavy, and the mounting layers were heavy too. Shoveling would be near impossible, and snowblowers crippled by the weight. It was snow like this earlier this year that took her shoveling neighbor, kindly, portly, white haired, and wise, when she, at 10, was just learning to spread her butterfly wings. Pam still has family back in Memphis, and we still have some property, so we get back there pretty close to once a year for a short time at least. And our drives take us through Tornado Tunnel Valley, whatever it's called. And this one is called Tornado March 2023. Surfing over asphalt on Highway 55 in northeast Arkansas, watching white knuckled the black curtains drape over a white afternoon April sun, and darkness settled like the dusk of 3 p.m. Gethsemane, while the winds redoubled their assault. Peanut-sized raindrops pelted the windshield, while wipers on high flailed futilely against the relentless rain. In a small town a few miles off the highway, Thor unleashed his ugly black finger from sky to ground, leveling buildings and killing helpless cattle. That's a true story. This one's called Mount Nebo Sunset. Sitting on the grass, sloping toward the precipice on the west face of Mount Nebo, a small group gathers to watch the sun setting, the brilliant orange orb descending against the unbesmirched blue sky. And if you watch carefully enough, you can see the slow movement as the sun's lower lip narrows the gap to the level line of the distant horizon. Soon the sun is sitting on the earth, its bottom edge now shaved to a short, flat edge as the backdrop drape of sky turns deeper blue and the sun's dropping is measured in minutes. In two, it hides entirely beneath the earth, and the people rising from their beach towels and blankets begin to disperse. Already the scar is star-freckled, and flashlights light the path back up the slope. Teens. 4 drives down they sat, legs outstretched, facing each other on their skateboards, rolling slightly to and fro, talking seriously at 14 or 15. And then they were gone, each, I imagined, back home to parents and dinner, siblings and homework, but not without a certain glow. Ladybug. She tiptoes cautiously across the vast green plain, pausing here, pausing again there, uncertain, as she feels her wary way ahead. And then the pause as she contemplates her inevitable fate of fatal fall from the edge or incomprehensible annihilation at the hands of some god called a human. She trembles slightly, and the leaf quivers. Her camouflage spots protected her from her natural predators, birds, wasps injecting fertilized eggs into her armored but still delicate body. She wanders tremulously to the leaf's edge, not outdoors, but a plant on the sill of a sun-brightened kitchen window. She waits until saved by the gentle brushing of an enormous finger into an even more enormous palm and released into the morning outside the kitchen door. Okay, this poem is called Mating Time. Two great-tailed grackles sat side by side on a bare and budless backyard branch, each plumping feathers and fanning tails in turn, one tantalizing the other. Though snow still covers the ground and snowbanks line the streets, gray and soiled by auto excrement, the birds know spring is near and the time for making song, and little gracklets is not far behind. This is a poem that was inspired by my younger son when he was probably about 2 years old. And he had a favorite stuffed animal that he carried with him. They were inseparable. And this animal was named Webster Horse, which is the name of the poem. His belly was torn. His eyes were missing. His mane was made of shaggy strands of yarn. His name was Webster Horse, and he shared a bed with my son. He came with him to doctor's appointments, even to church, hardly ever leaving his arms, until the girl got sick, seriously sick, and he gave her his best friend, Webster Horse. When I retired from doing critical care in 2012, I almost immediately went to an organization called the Bereaved Families of Ontario, which is an organization that serves people who are suffering through loss. And I was particularly interested in the lack of resources here for parents who've lost children. And so I got involved with them and have been heavily involved ever since. This poem is called Grief Counseling. The weight of the dialogue dragged me down as I walked through the kitchen door. The pain of the client as he railed in anguish that he painted in words after his son and wife perished in the fiery crash. The echoes of his words pulled on my feet like heavy, sucking mud. Bipolar. It's that time again. Time for depression. Time to leave the kids with grandma. It's time to take 2-liter bottles of vodka and your father's vintage shotgun in the old, nearly antique caddy. Time to drive off to the woods nobody visits and find a campsite that won't see a tent or a campfire besides the one that rages in your soul. Bird songs. Oh, chickadee, take your black cap and your sweet and happy song. Take it somewhere else and take your goldfinch with you and her joyful trill somewhere far away. My mood is too dark today to be swayed by your allure. Take as well your robin friend's assertiveness. He gives little and takes nothing. Or even your blue jay cousin with his pretty chirps, flirty deceptions. Just leave me alone with your distant cousin, mourning dove, and together we can mourn this world fractured beyond repair. I can only speak for myself, but I think I speak probably for a lot of people who write poetry that there's a kind of a tension that exists between the pull of wanting to write things that have some social significance, especially in times like ours. And the loftier goal of writing a poem that somehow speaks directly to the heart, and maybe by speaking and inspiring the heart, generates healing through that process that bypasses the direct addressing of whatever the socio political realities are. So, with that background, this poem is called Sirens. The sirens sound, but with a different timbre, softer than the primal wail of an hour ago, when the skies turned yellow and the wind calmed to utter stillness, and thoughts turned to Dorothy and Toto and the yellow brick road and the raised town of Rolling Fork, Mississippi, just down the road. Halfway around the world, sirens just like these signal incoming volleys of missiles, and elders and children and parents have nowhere to hide, like I do not, with my wife, my two beloved dogs who trust me, nowhere to turn or hide as the vacuum gale sucks us up or the explosion engulfs us before we can even think to pray. This is the last poem, and it's the title poem from the collection, and it's called Listening to Miles Davis and Gil Evans on a January Night. I suspect that many of you know who Miles Davis is, and probably many of you don't yet know Gil Evans, and maybe in the Q&A I could talk ad nauseum about the two of them. But this is the poem. The scents of garlic and strong black pepper drift from the pan of thick split pea soup to my eager nostrils, and more garlic aroma as the buttered and spiced bread toasts. Outside, darkness is undisturbed by moon or stars, cold enough to cause piss shivers. No cars pass this neighborhood road. No bikers, runners, walkers with or without their headlighted dogs. When it's time to serve, I do my part and play my music on my diminutive speaker fed by phone and Bluetooth. Sketches of Spain. The mournful strains of the adagio evoke some Andalusian pain, and we blow on the spoonful of tongue-scalding soup, then relish the spicy baked samosas on the side. Well, it happened because I was listening to Miles Davis and Gil Evans. And for those of you who don't know, Miles Davis is like in my head, he's not human. He's like a demigod at least. And I mean, he's probably one of the best known jazz trumpet players. And most of his work was done in small groups, but he had three albums that were collaborations with the big band leader and arranger and orchestrator whose name was Gil Evans, whose style was decidedly different from anybody else in that period, which was like late 1950s, 1959. In fact, I think the referenced album Sketches of Spain was done in 1959. So yeah, it was kind of a lonely, dark, cold January night, and the only thing that was sort of bright on the horizon was the scent of this split pea soup, which I was quite eager to begin. But the listening to that music was just so moving, and as it often is, and that's kind of what inspired that poem. Not kind of, that's what inspired the poem. Very, very remiss if I didn't mention William Carlos Williams, who, oh yes, by the way, he was a doctor too. But he was probably one of the pioneers of free verse. Everybody knows the poem about the red wheelbarrow. You know, you read that poem and it's like, what the heck is this all about? And then it's like you try to turn the page and read the next poem, and it's like, this really bothers me. I'm going back. I'm going to look at that again. And that is the mark of a good poem. And William Carlos Williams did that. William Barry did that throughout his entire career, which is now he's now in his mid 80s, just like Ted Kooser. That that to me is the magic of poetry. That's the reason to write. You do that and you recreate the external universe that we think we know. You recreate it in your mind with your imagination, and you try to craft it into words that can be used by a reader to once again reimagine that universe in his or her own way, in a way that somehow resonates some fiber within their soul. And if that works, then that's really all that matters. You sure as
Right.
heck, you sure as heck don't do it for fame or fortune.